Hello everyone. Today I am going to take the chapter 1 of history 10th class, The Rise of Nationalism in Europe. The chapter deals with many of the issues visualized by Sarayu and will look at the diverse process through which nation states and the nationalism came into being in 19th century Europe. It's a very interesting chapter, children. The topics covered in this chapter are various, and in this video I'm going to tell you the whole chapter in a nutshell, so it is like a summary. The main topics covered in this chapter: the French Revolution and the rise of nationalism, nationalism and imperialism. The second point is the making of nationalism in Europe, the age of revolutions 1830 to 1848, the making of Germany and Italy, visualizing the nation and nationalism and imperialism. At the very outset in your book, there is a picture in which Frederick Sarayu has put forward the vision of the world. Now, he is a French artist who has described the vision of a nation, what a nation should be. He has explained in this picture that in 1948, actually he prepared a series of 4 prints with a vision of his dreams of a world made up of democratic and social republics. Here people, you are seeing that nearing towards the Statue of Liberty. The first print, the 4 prints are there. In the first print, he has shown the people of Europe and America marching in a long train and offering homage to the statue. Okay. Statue of Liberty as they passes it. The torch of enlightenment, this is the torch of enlightenment, was carried by a female figure in one hand and the Charter of the Rights of Man in the other hand. This is the Charter of the Rights of Man in the other hand. On the earth, in the second figure, he tells, on the earth, in the foreground, lie the shattered remains of the symbols of absolutist institutions. In Sarayu's utopian vision, the people of the world are grouped as distinct nations identified through their flags and national costume. You can see here. They're having their flags and their national costumes. Then, Sarayu's utopian vision, the people of the world are grouped as distinct nations identified through their flags and national costume. The procession was led by United States. That means the leader was United States and Switzerland, followed by France, Germany and other nations of Europe. Following the German people are the people of Austria, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, Lombardy, Poland, England, Ireland, Hungary and Russia, which we will be studying in the chapter. From the heavens above, in this picture you can see, from the heavens above, Christ, saints and angels. Saints are there and angels are there. Okay? Gaze upon the scene. They have been used by the artist to symbolize fraternity among the nations of the world, right? When they have good relations, when they have, you must have heard about the important words or the slogan of the French Revolution. You already have read about the French Revolution. So During the 19th century, nationalism emerged as a force which brought huge changes in the political and the mental world of Europe. The end result of these changes was the emergence of nation states. Right? Could you understand that? Yes. Now, the next point is the French Revolution, and the French Revolution tells you about the idea of nation, what a nation is. Because in 1789, the nationalism came into existence after the French Revolution. And the political and the constitutional changes led to the transfer of sovereignty from the monarchy to a body of French citizens. Because earlier, all the states were governed by the rulers or the kings or the monarchs. But now, after the revolution of 1789, you have elaborately studied in 9th class. So you must be having a little bit in your mind. So keep that previous knowledge in your mind and think about the French Revolution. The basic concept that was that the political and the constitutional changes, people asked about the freedom, people asked about the constitutional democracy, a federal government where powers should not be vested in one hand, rather they should be distributed amongst different agencies of the government. So various measures and practices were introduced, such as the idea of the la patrie, the fatherland, and le citoyen. The ideas of la patrie and le citoyen, the citizen, and a new French flag, the tricolor, was chosen to replace the former one. So this is the way how the concept of a nation came into existence. Democracy destroyed in France later on, if you talk about, that is there in your book, that when Napoleon came to the power, he again took all the powers in his hands and he destroyed the democracy. So when I'm telling you in a nutshell, I'll be telling you, explaining you when I'll be explaining the French Revolution and the concept of nationalism. The second point is the making of nationalism in Europe. Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, and duchies and the cantons whose rulers had their autonomous territories, they were an example for the other bigger nationalities, and they were ruling rather more successfully than the bigger countries. Here, the aristocracy and the middle class developed at that time. Then, liberal nationalism came into existence, and you need to understand here what is liberal nationalism. The term liberalism derives from the Latin root liber, meaning free. So in this second point, you have to understand about how nationalism came into existence. Slowly, nationalism was not a one-day activity, rather it took years and years and decades when revolutionaries fought. Then only the democracies or the other forms of governments could be restored in Europe. The next subheading you need to understand the age of revolutions. Many revolutions took place. As I said, nationalism was not the outcome of one day. The age of revolutions you have to study from 1830 to 1848, when many kings were ruling in different parts of Europe, in different countries of Europe, and their thrones were overthrown. Their power was challenged by the revolutionaries, and here only in this point you study about the romantic imagination and the national flag. When nationalism began, or nationalism became a romanticism, when it comes in the terms of romanticism, oh, people were just fighting, fighting and fighting, living only for restoring a nationalist feeling, only for the restoration of the democratic governments. They were very much firm to overthrow all the kingships, all the monarchies, and establish only and only democratic forms of government. Here, it was not very easy for the people. There was a lot of hunger, there were a number of hardships, and of course popular revolts. Then with the nationalism there were liberals also, those who wanted to keep the kings and the kingdoms with the emergence of new forms of governments. But revolutionaries never wanted those governments. They wanted a total change. So this was a clash between the revolutionaries and the liberals. Now when we come towards the fourth point, the making of the Germany and Italy, this particular point explains you about the unification of Germany and the unification of Italy. In the 18th and the 19th century, artists represented a country as a person and nations as a female figures. Here only you study about the Europe moved away after 1848 and Germany and Italy came to be unified as nation states. They came to be known as the nation states. Prussia took over the leadership of the movement for national unification in Germany, and the architect of this process was its chief minister Otto von Bismarck, carried out with the help of the Prussian army and bureaucracy. This you are going to study in this point. And the unification of Italy was followed by Germany, and Giuseppe Mazzini was the leader of this reform. Then we come to know about visualizing the nation. In the 18th and 19th century, artists represented a country as a person and nations as female figures. I already have discussed. So in this chapter, in this particular topic, fifth topic, it is almost we have done a very small topic. Then nationalism and imperialism. How nationalism gave birth to imperialism, and this imperialism led to the First World War. Nationalism no longer retained after the last quarter of the 19th century. Why? After 1871, the most tensed area was called the Balkans, and this was a major area which was responsible for First World War also. This was a region comprising of Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia and Montenegro. So I will be discussing all these points in this chapter, and you will have a clarity of this chapter. Children think that the chapter is not very difficult, and you are studying nationalism in India for so many years. Now this particular lesson will lead you towards the nationalism, because French Revolution 1789 was the beginning, and imperialism led towards the First World War. Was, of course, here it is written that the last quarter of the 19th century was no longer retained nationalism, rather intense rivalry built among the European powers over trade and colonies, because staunch nationalism, the feeling of nationalism, gave rise to the expansion, because nationalist feeling was there amongst the nations. So they thought of expanding their empire outside Europe, outside their boundaries. So once they started establishing colonies for the sake of trade, and later on converted all those colonies to the imperial states, that only began the causes, that only gave rise of the causes of the First World War. Thank you very much for the introduction of this particular chapter.